Sometimes the worst betrayal doesn't begin in a hotel room. Sometimes it begins with a smile you were too exhausted to question. If you had asked me a year ago whether my wife would ever betray me, I would have laughed in your face. Not because our marriage was perfect. It wasn't. It had bills, stress, silence, routines, and the kind of tired love that no one posts online. The kind that wakes up at 5:30 in the morning, packs lunches, pays insurance, folds towels still warm from the dryer, and kisses a forehead instead of starting an argument, because peace feels more important than being right. That was us. Or at least, that's what I thought we were. My name is Ethan Walker, and for 12 years I loved my wife Natalie, like she was the safest place I'd ever found in a dangerous world. We built a life in Columbus, Ohio, a modest 2-story home with white siding, a maple tree in the front yard, and a kitchen island we once argued over for 3 straight weekends before finally choosing the cheaper one. We had a 9-year-old daughter named Avery, who still slipped her hand into mine when we crossed parking lots. We had a dog named Scout who barked at delivery drivers like he was protecting a mansion instead of a house with a cracked driveway. We had a real life. And real life, I learned, is exactly what makes betrayal hurt so much. Because affairs don't just break hearts, they break routines. They poison memories. They turn ordinary rooms into crime scenes. It started with the gym. Natalie had been saying for months that she felt stuck. That was her word. Stuck. Stuck in motherhood, stuck in her body, stuck in our routine, stuck in a version of herself that only existed for everyone else. I listened. At least, I thought I did. I told her she should take time for herself. I told her she deserved that. I even encouraged her to join a new fitness center that had opened near the shopping plaza off Riverside Drive. It was cleaner, brighter, and more expensive than the old one. She said she wanted a trainer, someone who could keep her accountable. Do it, I told her. You've done enough for everybody else. I still remember the smile she gave me that night. God, I hate that I remember it. Because now I know that smile was the beginning of the end. His name was Mason Cole. 32. Lean, sharp jawline, 2 white teeth, arms that looked engineered in a lab, and the kind of confidence that comes from living in mirrors. He had one of those voices that sounded practiced, warm enough to be trusted, smooth enough to be dangerous. I met him once, maybe twice, before everything fell apart. The first time was at the gym's open house. Natalie waved me over like she was proud. Ethan, this is Mason, she said. He's the trainer I told you about. Mason stuck out his hand and smiled. Your wife's a machine, man. She works harder than most of my clients. I laughed politely and shook his hand. Firm grip. Steady eye contact. Just enough admiration in his tone to make me feel good, not threatened. That's how men like him operate. They don't enter your life like a storm. They enter like sunlight. At first the changes were small. Natalie started going to the gym 4 times a week instead of 2. Then 5. Then sometimes on Saturdays too. She bought new leggings, new sports bras, new sneakers, new protein shakes with labels I couldn't pronounce. She began taking longer getting ready, even on days she claimed she was just going to sweat. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I told myself what every trusting husband tells himself when he doesn't want to look insecure. She's trying to feel good again. Don't ruin that. The thing about betrayal is that it rarely arrives without warning. It arrives with warnings you keep forgiving. Her phone used to live anywhere, on the couch, on the counter, plugged in near the bed. Suddenly it was always face down, always in her hand, always within reach. She started smiling at messages and then immediately straightening her face when I looked up. She laughed, less with me and more with her screen. At dinner, Avery would be talking about school, and Natalie would nod half a second too late, like she'd had to swim back to the table from somewhere far away. That somewhere had a name. I just didn't know it yet. One Friday night, I came home early from work. I manage operations for a regional flooring company, and one of our jobs got postponed because of a permit issue. For once, I was home before 6. I picked up Chinese takeout on the way because Natalie loved sesame chicken, and Avery always begged for extra crab rangoon. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Scout came trotting up, tail wagging. Avery was upstairs in her room watching cartoons. "Where's Mum?" I called. Avery answered from upstairs. "Jim." I checked the microwave clock. 6:12 p.m. That wasn't strange by itself. What was strange was what happened next. Natalie came home at 7:40, flushed and glowing, but not in the way you glow after a workout. Her hair was brushed. Her makeup, light but intentional. And when she leaned in to kiss my cheek, I caught a scent that wasn't shampoo or sweat. Cologne. Not mine. My stomach turned so hard I actually had to set the takeout bag down. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "Long day." She smiled, but not all the way. "Sorry I'm late. Mason had me doing this new circuit, and I completely lost track of time." There it was. His name sliding into my kitchen like it belonged there. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask why a workout smelled like another man's chest. I wanted to demand her phone, her honesty, her attention, something. But Avery came running downstairs, and Natalie lit up in that instant, kneeling to hug her like she was still the same mother, still the same woman. And maybe that's what broke me first. Not the suspicion. The confusion. How someone can still look like the person you love while slowly becoming a stranger. Over the next few weeks, I began collecting tiny wounds. A cancelled date night because she was too tired. A new password on her phone. A sudden obsession with privacy. A softness in her voice when she texted that never seemed meant for me. Once, at 11:30 p.m., I woke up and found her sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark, smiling down at her screen. "What are you doing?" I mumbled. She startled and locked the phone. Nothing. Couldn't sleep. I stared at the outline of her face in the blue light leaking through the curtains. There are moments in a marriage when truth enters the room long before proof does. That was one of them. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wish I could tell you that I was calm and strategic. I wasn't. I was scared. Scared of being right. Scared of blowing up my daughter's life over something that maybe, still had another explanation. So I did what a lot of broken people do when they're trying not to break. I became quieter. I watched. One Tuesday morning, Natalie left her smartwatch charging in the bathroom while she rushed Avery to school. Her phone buzzed on the sink. Then the watch lit up. A preview message. "Mason, still thinking about yesterday. Wish I could have stayed longer." I stopped breathing. I didn't touch the watch at first. I just stared at it like it might burst into flames and save me from reading the rest. Then another message came in. "Mason, you looked beautiful after. Dangerous combination. After." That word hit harder than any profanity could have. After what? After training? After coffee? After kissing him? After sleeping with him? The room actually tilted. I grabbed the sink and looked at my own reflection. I didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked older than me, hollowed out, like someone had quietly removed his insides and left the shell to discover it later. When Natalie came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table. The watch was in front of me. She saw it and stopped cold. In that 1 second, before either of us spoke, the whole marriage changed. "What is that?" she asked, too softly. I laughed once. It came out ugly. "You tell me." She didn't move. I pointed to the watch. "Read it out loud." "Ethan." "No." "Read it." "Out. Loud." "Read exactly what your trainer sent you." Her face drained of colour. She looked toward the stairs like she was checking whether Avery could hear. I stood up so fast the chair scraped hard against the floor. "Don't look away from me." She flinched. That flinch still lives in me. Not because I scared her, because I realized in that moment she was afraid of the truth, not the lie. "It's not what you think," she whispered. I remember laughing again, louder this time, meaner, the kind of laugh that only comes from people whose hearts have just been kicked in. "Then what do I think, Natalie? Explain it to me. What exactly am I misunderstanding about wish I could have stayed longer?" She sat down slowly, pressing her fingers to her temples. "I was going to tell you, that sentence should be studied in labs. Because no phrase in the English language has ever done more damage after the fact." I stared at her. "When?" No answer. "When?" "Natalie?" Tears filled her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen. And there it was. Not denial, not confusion. A confession dressed like helplessness. I felt something inside me go quiet. "Did you sleep with him?" She closed her eyes. That was my answer. I turned away because I honestly thought if I kept looking at her I would collapse. "How long?" "A few months. A few months. People say words can't kill. They're wrong. Those two almost did. I thought about every dinner, every grocery run, every bedtime story, every I'm at the gym, every kiss she gave me with his hand still somewhere in her memory. "A few months," I repeated. She started crying then. The real kind. Hard, trembling, ugly crying. "I'm sorry." But sorry is a weak little word when it arrives after deceit has already unpacked and made itself at home. I asked if she loved him. She didn't answer fast enough. And that hurt even more than the affair. Because silence has a way of confirming what guilt is too cowardly to say. Finally she whispered, "I don't know." That was the moment my marriage died. Not when she slept with him, not when she lied, not when I found out. It died when the woman who once swore I was her home looked me in the eye and couldn't even confidently tell me I was still the man she loved. I slept in the guest room that night. Or maybe I just lay there till sunrise. I'm not sure I slept at all. Around 3 a.m., I heard her outside the door. "Ethan," she said softly, "please talk to me." I said nothing. A minute later, I heard her slide down the wall and cry. Somewhere in the house, the refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. My daughter slept down the hall, unaware that her parents had just split in half. There is no pain quite like trying to stay quiet while your whole life is collapsing one room away. The next morning, I made Avery pancakes. I burned the first batch because I kept zoning out. She sat at the table in unicorn pajamas, swinging her feet under the chair, asking if we could go to the Science Museum that weekend. I smiled and said, "We'll see, Bug." Natalie came downstairs with swollen eyes. Avery looked between us the way children do when they don't understand tension but can feel it sitting heavy in the air. "Mommy, are you sick?" Avery asked. Natalie forced a smile. Just tired, sweetheart. That lie, tiny compared to the others, somehow made me hate the whole room. Over the next week, the truth came out in pieces, like glass. Yes, she'd met him during training sessions. Yes, it started emotionally before it became physical. Yes, they'd had sex. More than once. Sometimes in his apartment, once in his car. Once this detail nearly buried me while I thought she was at a Saturday yoga class. Every answer ruined something else. Every detail took an ordinary memory and soaked it in poison. She said she'd felt unseen. She said we'd become roommates. She said Mason made her feel desired, alive, young again. I wanted to scream, and what was I doing while you were feeling unseen? Working late. Fixing the leak under the sink, refinancing the mortgage, taking Avery to the dentist, picking up your favorite coffee when I knew you'd had a bad morning. Being faithful. Being present. Being boring, maybe, but honest. There's a cruelty in being compared to fantasy when you've been carrying reality on your back. She asked if we could go to counseling. I asked if she'd stopped seeing him. She hesitated. That hesitation was its own answer. A week later, she told me she wanted a divorce. Not because the marriage was beyond saving, at least not in the way she phrased it. She said she needed to be honest about where her heart is. I'll never forget those words. Where her heart is. As if a heart is some innocent drifter that accidentally wanders into another man's bed. I looked at the woman I had loved for over a decade and realized she had spent months rewriting our story while I was still trying to live inside it. Is it him? I asked. She cried again. Partly. Partly. It's amazing how betrayal can still find new knives even after you think you've already been stabbed everywhere. I hired a lawyer named Denise Harper. Practical, sharp, no wasted words. She looked over my paperwork, asked calm questions, and treated my heartbreak like what it had become in the eyes of the law. A division of assets, custody schedules, signatures. That was its own kind of horror. Watching a marriage become paperwork. Natalie moved into the guest room while we figured out next steps. We orbited each other in the same house like ghosts tied to unfinished business. She still packed Avery's lunches. I still mowed the lawn. We still stood in the same kitchen discussing field trip permission slips and dog food while the ashes of our vows floated invisibly between us. Sometimes I caught her watching me like she wanted me to rescue her from the consequences of what she'd done. But there are betrayals too deep for rescue. One evening, after Avery went to bed, Natalie sat across from me at the dining table and said, "You think I'm a monster." I took a long breath. No, she looked almost relieved. Then I said, "I think you made selfish choices over and over again and called them feelings so you wouldn't have to hate yourself." She broke down. I didn't feel powerful saying it. I just felt tired. That winter was the longest season of my life. Friends found out slowly. My older sister Julia cried on the phone before I did. My best friend Marcus came over with beer and didn't try to force inspirational nonsense on me. He just sat there and let me say ugly things into the dark. You know what the worst part is? I told him one night. He shook his head. I still miss her. That's the humiliation nobody talks about. How the betrayed person is expected to feel clean hatred, simple anger, obvious closure. But grief is messier than pride. I missed her laugh at stupid commercials. I missed the way she used to tuck cold feet under my legs in bed. I missed grocery shopping with her on Sunday mornings. I missed the version of her that maybe no longer existed, or maybe never existed at all. Marcus looked at me and said, "Missing who she was doesn't mean you have to accept who she became." I held on to that sentence like a life raft. Avery took it the hardest once we finally told her. We sat her down in the living room. Natalie cried before we even got through the first minute. I kept my voice steady and told Avery that Mummy and Daddy were going to live in different houses, but we both loved her more than anything in the world. She just stared at us. Then she looked at me and said, "Did I do something bad?" That question split me open. I pulled her into my lap and said, "No, baby, never. None of this is because of you. Not one piece of it." She sobbed into my shirt until it was wet through. That night, after I tucked her in, I sat in my car in the garage and cried so hard I thought I'd throw up. Because adults betray each other and children pay emotional rent on damage they never caused. A month after Natalie moved into an apartment across town, the illusion finally cracked for her. I know this because she told me. Apparently Mason wasn't so magnetic in real life once secrecy turned into daylight. He wasn't a soulmate. He was a man who loved being chosen over another man. Once there was no competition, no stolen thrill, no risk, there wasn't much substance left. He didn't want step-parent responsibilities. He didn't want real-life sadness. He didn't want a woman recovering from the wreckage she helped create. He wanted excitement. Affairs are often built like movie sets, convincing from the front, empty behind the wall. One afternoon, while dropping Avery off, Natalie lingered on the porch after Avery ran inside. She looked thinner, less polished, realer, somehow. "Mason and I ended things," she said. I said nothing. She folded her arms against the cold. "I made a mistake. There are moments you fantasize about when you've been betrayed, moments where the person who hurt you finally sees the fire they started. You imagine triumph, vindication, satisfaction. But when it finally happened, I felt almost nothing. Just distance, a grave kind of distance." "You didn't make a mistake," I said quietly. "You made choices." Her eyes filled. "I know. No," I said. "I don't think you do." A mistake is forgetting a birthday card. A mistake is backing into a mailbox. What you did was a campaign. It was sustained, protected, repeated. You looked me in the face while you did it. She started crying. And for the first time, I didn't move toward her. I didn't comfort her. I didn't soften. I didn't rescue. Healing, I learned, sometimes looks like refusing to become the bandage for the wounds someone else gave you. The divorce was finalized in May. 12 years reduced to signatures and court stamps. Natalie kept her apartment and some savings. I kept the house. We shared custody of Avery. The judge spoke kindly, efficiently, like he'd done this 1,000 times and knew better than to linger over grief. When it was over, I walked outside into the parking lot and just stood there. No music swelled, no dramatic revelation hit, no freedom washed over me, just wind, just sunlight on concrete. Just the strange feeling of surviving something that should have killed the person I used to be. The first year after was not beautiful. I want to tell you I transformed overnight, started running at sunrise, got therapy immediately, found inner peace in hardcover journals and black coffee. That's not what happened. What happened was messier. I forgot to eat some nights. I overworked. I scrolled through old photos I should have deleted. I wondered if I'd been too dull, too tired, too easy to betray. I questioned my face, my age, my body, my worth. Betrayal leaves fingerprints on your self-esteem. It makes you compete with a ghost. But little by little, life returned. Not the old life. Something quieter. More honest. I started therapy with a man named Dr. Raymond Ellis, who had kind eyes and the dangerous habit of asking the exact question you were trying to avoid. One day he asked, "Why do you believe her betrayal says something final about your value?" I stared at him. Because that was it, wasn't it? That secret, rotten belief. If she chose him, maybe I wasn't enough. He let the silence stretch before saying, "People don't always betray because someone better came along. Sometimes they betray because integrity would have required them to face themselves." That changed something in me. Not all at once, but enough. I began taking Avery on weekend drives again. We'd get milkshakes, listen to old pop songs, and make fun of the GP's voice. I repainted the guest room. I planted tomatoes in the backyard because my father used to do that after every hard year of his life, as if growing something edible proved the future was still worth investing in. Slowly, the house stopped feeling haunted. One Saturday, nearly 14 months after the divorce, Avery was in the yard drawing with sidewalk chalk when she looked up and said, "Dad? Yeah, Bug? You smile more now. Kids will tell the truth adults dance around." I smiled at her then, genuinely. "I think I do." She nodded like she'd solved a puzzle and went back to drawing hearts on the driveway. That night I stood at the kitchen sink, the same sink where I first saw those messages, and realized I could remember the betrayal without drowning in it. That was new. That was healing. A few weeks later, I ran into Natalie at Avery's school concert. She looked nervous around me, but gentler than before. Time had taken some of the performance out of both of us. After the concert, while Avery ran ahead to hug a friend, Natalie turned to me. "You look good," she said. "Thanks." She swallowed. "I know I don't deserve this, but I'm glad you're doing better." I looked at her for a long moment. And here is where most stories would force a grand speech. A dramatic final line. Some perfect revenge dressed as wisdom, but real life is quieter than that. So I told her the truth. "I'm doing better because I stopped waiting for you to become sorry enough to fix what you broke." She nodded, tears forming instantly. And this time I didn't say it to hurt her. I said it because it was finally true. Avery came running back then, grabbing both our hands for half a second before tugging us toward the parking lot. For one strange, suspended moment, we looked like a family again. But not every familiar shape is meant to be re-entered. Some doors only exist to teach you why you had to leave. If you're listening to my story hoping I'll tell you I got revenge, I didn't. If you're hoping I'll say she begged for me back, she did, in her own way, months later. Subtle calls, lingering eye contact, apologies with no real destination. But by then, I had learned something betrayal forces into your bones. Closure is not watching them suffer. Closure is no longer needing to. I don't hate Natalie. That surprises people. Hatred requires a kind of emotional investment I no longer owe her. What I feel now is sorrow. Sorrow for the man I was when I still believed love alone could protect a marriage from character. Sorrow for the child caught in the crossfire. Sorrow for the woman who mistook attention for meaning and desire for destiny. But sorrow is lighter than bitterness, and lighter things are easier to carry. So if you're somewhere inside a story like mine right now, if the person you trusted most has made you feel replaceable, forgettable, insufficient, listen carefully. Their betrayal is not your obituary. It is not proof that you were too little. It is not evidence that loyalty is foolish. It is not the end of your ability to be loved well. Sometimes people break what is good simply because they are too restless, too vain, too afraid, or too empty to honor it. That is about them, not you. I still live in that same house in Columbus. The maple tree out front is taller now. Scout is slower. Avery is almost up to my shoulder. Life kept moving even when I was certain it had stopped. And every now and then, usually in the quietest moments, I think back to who I was before I knew. The husband standing in his kitchen with takeout in his hand. The man still innocent enough to believe cologne on his wife's skin must belong to somebody else. The version of me who thought betrayal would look obvious if it ever came. I don't miss his ignorance, but I do honor his heart. Because he loved honestly. He trusted fully. He showed up clean. And in the end, that matters. Not because it saved the marriage, but because it saved me from becoming the kind of person who destroys others and calls it self-discovery. So yes, my wife had an affair with her fitness trainer. Yes, she asked me for a divorce. Yes, there were nights I thought the pain would bury me where I stood. But that is not where my story ends. In a quiet kitchen, in a home that feels like mine again. In a life I did not choose, but learned to rebuild. In the steady, hard-earned peace of a man who finally understands that being left for someone else is painful, but abandoning yourself because of it would be the real tragedy. And I survived too much to do that.